There is a major fire in Russia after a large railway accident. Early this morning, in the Smolensk region, 18 fuel tank cars derailed. According to Russian officials, a freight train collided with a truck that drove onto a railway crossing directly in front of the locomotive. The driver tried to brake, but a collision was unavoidable. As a result, the locomotive and the tank cars carrying gasoline went off the tracks and caught fire, sparking a massive blaze. The train driver and his assistant were injured, and they are reported to be in a moderate condition. The truck driver was killed. Rail traffic in the area has been completely halted. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has issued a sharp warning, saying alliance members must be ready to shoot down Russian aircraft that violate NATO airspace if necessary. Speaking in New York, he stressed that allied forces are well trained to decide whether an intruding plane is a serious threat to be neutralized or a provocation that should simply be escorted back. Dutch Prime Minister Schoof also underlined this position. In an interview with Bloomberg in New York, he warned that NATO could in the future bring down a Russian aircraft if Moscow continues its incursions, calling such actions a big violation. Schoof said that the Russians should clearly understand the risk they are taking. These statements reflect growing determination within NATO to respond firmly to repeated Russian airspace violations as allies debate how best to counter Moscow's escalation provocation. And in Denmark, the tension is also growing. For the third time in just a few days, drones were reportedly spotted near Aalborg Airport, forcing authorities to close the airspace once again. The police confirmed the shutdown late at night, around midnight, after someone reported seeing a drone in the area. More units were sent to the airport, although officials say they still cannot confirm for sure that it really was a drone. One flight had to be redirected, and passengers were left waiting while police checked the skies. As the duty officer explained to Danish media, it's not easy to tell under a starry night sky what exactly people have seen, so every case needs to be verified carefully. This string of incidents has left many asking if Russia's hybrid war tactics are now expanding deeper in NATO territory, from military airspace violations to drone scares that shut down civilian airports. And while NATO is busy reacting to daily provocations in the air and on the ground, the Netherlands is warning about the bigger picture. Dutch Defense Minister Ruben Brekelmans said Russia is shifting fully onto a war footing, producing more weapons and mobilizing more soldiers than it needs for the current war in Ukraine. He warned that by 2030, Moscow wants to be ready for large-scale confrontation with NATO. According to him, this shows that Putin has both the intention and the capacity to continue his imperial aggression. Brekelmans stressed that the West must make it absolutely clear to the Kremlin that any hostile action against a NATO member will be met with overwhelming force. He also underlined that supporting Ukraine remains essential, not just in the short term, but for the long term too, to make sure Russia's aggression is contained. The Telegraph writes that Ukraine can win back all the territory it has lost since 2014, but only if three key conditions are met. In his column, analyst Hamish de Breton-Gordon argues that President Donald Trump is right this time when he says Ukraine can reclaim its land, but his words must be backed by action. The article notes Trump's recent use of the phrase paper tiger to describe Russia, a term that points to something which looks powerful but is in fact weak. Ironically, the Telegraph observes it a description borrowed from China, Putin's supposed ally. According to this piece, the first condition is the creation of a non-fly zone, at least in western Ukraine, to shield civilians. With Europe's fleet of F-35 fighters, that could be enforced from outside Ukraine's skies, leaving no chance for direct clashes with Russian jets. The second is to provide Ukraine with many more long-range precision missiles financed by Europe, and to remove restrictions on what targets they can strike deep inside Russia. The Telegraph notes that Ukraine's own long-range drone and missile strikes are already effective, and with Western technology, their impact could multiply. The third is to impose the full spectrum of sanctions, not just threaten them. Europe, the article concludes, must be ready to stand alongside Ukrainian cities, even the ground or on the air, if Trump's vision is to become reality. Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has once again tried to rewrite the narrative of the war, this time from the stage of the United Nations. At a G20 meeting of foreign ministers, he claimed that NATO and the EU had declared a real war on Moscow, but supporting Ukraine. The accusation, echoing years of Kremlin propaganda, was swiftly dismissed by Britain's Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper as false fantasy, world distortions. Lavrov ignored the obvious, that it was Russia which launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, and that its forces still occupy roughly 20% of the country more than 3 years later. Instead, he repeated Moscow's talking points about Western provocation, even as Russian drones and jets continue to violate NATO airspace. The timing of Lavrov's words was also telling. Just days earlier, US President Donald Trump toughened his rhetoric, mocking Russia's stalled offensive and saying NATO allies should shut down Russian aircraft that intrude into their skies. Ukraine and some European leaders welcomed Trump's sharper tone, but others worry it may reflect an American push to leave Europe with the heavier burden of supporting Kyiv. Despite calls from allies, Trump has also so far held back from imposing sweeping new sanctions on Russia, preferring tariffs on India for buying Russian oil and weighing similar moves against China. This hesitation only sharpens the contrast between Lavrov's aggressive disinformation campaign and the West's uneven response. EU foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas warned that nothing in Russia's strategy has changed. Putin still seeks to subjugate Ukraine. Against this backdrop, Lavrov's UN speech was less a diplomatic statement and more a reminder of how far Russia is willing to bend reality, even as it wages an unprovoked war of aggression. That's all for now. For more content, please subscribe.